what all is going on and really take stock of how our food system is responding to a lot of these cuts that have been coming from the federal government. Um, I have a little bit of an agenda here, and I want to start by contextualizing this in saying everybody's still figuring out what to do, and a lot of folks are really scrambling. This opportunity was provided to us by CIFPAC to be able to have this conversation because they knew that it was a really relevant one. And we are building this plane while flying it, so we're figuring it out just as much as you all. And so, yeah, we're grateful for your presence here, and would really appreciate it if you took some time to introduce yourself, name, organization, and if you want to say anything as well about how you were affected by federal cuts or how you might want to be able to contribute to um, assisting folks, what sorts of like extra capacity you have, go ahead and provide that, but we'll have an opportunity later on in the conversation too for folks to be able to start to talk about offers and needs a little bit. Um, in terms of the way that I thought we could set up today's conversation, we're gonna just quickly introduce ourselves and give you some context as to why it's us that are spotlighted on your screens right now. Talk a little bit about some of the updates in terms of what we know at the federal level, and then also just some what are the commonly asked questions that have led to dead ends recently, just so that we don't end up jumping too deep into those, so that we all just know where things stand, and then talking about some of the emergent pathways that are starting to come together around how folks are responding to this. And then particularly what is the navigator's role in terms of the spaces that we're holding, and then where are the other places that people might be able to plug in before then opening up the conversation to respond to some of the solutions that are in play and giving people an opportunity to talk a little bit about their stories in terms of how they've been affected by these cuts and what capacity you might have to contribute to the variety of solutions that are starting to emerge from the really, I would say, like coordinated and earnest and really energized response from our food system that has arisen in the past month or so since these cuts have started to emerge, right? Um, so starting off by just grounding us in who we are. My name is Nick Davis. I work at the Community Food Navigator. We are an organization that is really focused on supporting the food system through supporting growers and doing a lot of community building and organizing and food systems coordination to help communities to work towards food sovereignty, and are particularly focused on growers of color in the region, but build a lot of tools to help to build relationships and to facilitate different spaces in the food system, um, to make sure that all of our growers in the communities that most need food throughout Chicago are receiving it. And Israel, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself really quickly as well, as my co-presenter today.
Yeah, yeah. So hi everyone, my name is Israel Munoz Mireles. I'm the online community manager at the Community Food Navigator. So for those of you who might be newer to the Community Food Navigator, one of the things that we do is offer a digital space for folks to convene and discuss food justice topics, share resources, updates, things of that nature. The Navigator space, the digital space, is a bit more focused towards Chicago and the surrounding region, but we are in this moment we're kind of trying to bring as many people as we can into that space to discuss solutions to this issue. Yeah, my primary responsibility is managing the space as well as managing the resources that we share with community and creating better systems for facilitating the sharing of those resources. Uh, Excited to be here with you all. You'll do really important work, and yeah, glad to be part of this conversation.
Thank you both. And just real quick, there will be interactions and discussions as we move forward. So Blake, if you want to just, you can put your hand down and we'll respond to things shortly. And this will be an interactive discussion as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I really do want to knock out the part where we're talking as quickly as possible, so that we can really get into the more interesting piece. And I'm excited about that conversation. But a little more context as to why we're hosting this conversation in particular. We, for the past couple of years, have been hosting a space for the local food purchasing agreement, which is a federal grant that the state of Illinois has received, and also branded as Illinois Eats. And it was tens of millions of dollars in federal funding that was going to directly serve particularly socially disadvantaged growers in the region, and purchase their food and distribute it to community distribution sites, particularly in areas that have been most affected by food insecurity. In this program, it is commonly known as LFPA. We coordinated this space before the original request for proposals was sent out for LFPA. So we got a lot of the folks who were the usual suspects who might be applying for this, especially in Cook County, and had conversations around, we know this money is coming in. How are ways that we might be able to work with one another to, instead of fighting over this grant funding, figuring out who has the real operational and administrative capacity to roll this out, and then how can folks partner with each other strategically to make this happen. And I give you this background to say that we've been thinking about how to work with federal funding and work within our food systems in ways that go beyond just the bounds of the way that grants are written. And we've been wanting to kind of flex this muscle for some time around how we kind of set the rules for ourselves around what a local food system means. And so as we get into all the conversations around and updates around federal funding, know that for some time you all have been practicing what it means to have a sustainable local food system. The thing that we were depending on for most of that time was federal funding with a lot of these programs, but the actual mechanisms and the material capacity to move food from farms to the families that need it still exists. And if we can retain those relationships and that infrastructure and all of those like plans to be able to put crop in the ground so we have the capacity to feed ourselves, then we actually have a shot here. But some of the news that is coming out of this is dire. And I want to also say that some people are disproportionately affected by this. And so as we get into some of these updates, know that there are people who might be thinking about, just switching which program they're working on moving forward. And there's some people who are thinking about, laying off their staff or not putting their farms into production. And so just to make sure that we enter this conversation with sensitivity and knowing that there are going to be a lot of different ways that people are entering this conversation, and we're holding room for kind of all the range of emotions that can kind of come from that, but just making sure that people are aware of that as we get into this space. But we welcome y'all's raw responses as we get into this, because I think that's the way that we're going to climb out of this. All right, into the actual updates themselves. There have been a series of cuts to federal programs like LFPA over the course of the last month. This includes the Regional Conservation Protection Program, or the RCPP program, that was recently signed between Cook County and the Conservation Fund. And it also includes a variety of other programs that affect local schools, all the way to infrastructure investments in farms that amounts to, within the state of Illinois, just in terms of the last press release that they put out, just in terms of LFPA and I believe it was RFSI combined, that that would add up to $17.8 million in federal funding that was anticipated that would be cut, that goes either towards infrastructure investments on farms or towards the ability to purchase food at a premium from growers and get that out to community distribution sites. There are a lot of people who are reeling from this news, and it has certainly affected a wide swath of folks who are in food systems work. And a lot of you all already know all of this, but we're starting from the very bottom just because we want to make sure that we're kind of baselining with everyone. And so appreciate you all kind of going through these updates with us. But basically, there are a series of attempts to be able to address this, and they're starting to sort themselves into a variety of categories. We want to get into that, but first, there are a couple of things that I want to make sure we sort out just in terms of who has answers to this and what sorts of solutions and people are employing and what sorts of trees people are barking up. So right now, there is a lot of difficulty in terms of communication between the federal agencies that are administering these programs and the people who have usually been the lines of communication for those. That could be anyone from government relations people to local and state representatives to people who work in our departments and department agencies like, the state level NRCS and USDA or the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And a lot of those people who brought those programs to farms and talked to growers about what's going on and pulled them in don't always have the answers around what is happening with these federal programs. And what I want to make sure is happening too is that the kind of lack of knowledge and the kind of swirl that comes from all of this disruption doesn't lead to us disrupting the relationships that were really important that were formed during that. What we know is that there's going to be uncertainty when it comes to federal programming for a while now. But for folks who were invested in or who were taking advantage of these programs, I think for people like us at the Community Food Navigator and other people who are in like policy spaces and getting updated on these, it kind of behooves us to make sure that the folks who might be at places like Extension and Department of Agriculture and the other places where growers were repeatedly getting information also have like up-to-date information on what we're learning so that they're able to have clear communication with growers and we're able to give people answers that are better than silence and are able to actually plug them into spaces that are productive for them. And so I think the way that we start to move forward from some of this is making sure that when people are saying, what's going on, we're able to provide them with an answer that's more, that has a little bit more nutrition to it than just, I don't know, and we're able to actually plug them into these spaces where decisions are being made. And to that end, the Community Food Navigator is going to be particularly invested in a lot of the grassroots solutions as it pertains to opening up some market channels for growers, as well as figuring out how to create a central location for people to be able to get updates just around what's going on in the federal level, and be able to plug people into the various spaces where these conversations are being had, so that there's more communication and organization writ large throughout the food system. And what we're learning as we are on all of these, federal and county and citywide calls, is that the solutions that are emerging seem to fall into 4 broad categories. The first being, what can we do to support growers who are particularly thinking right now about putting seed in the ground? We're thinking about expanding a lot of their sales, and we're scaling up their operations, and we're planning on getting infrastructure investment. What does it look like to find market channels for them and set up spaces for aggregation and food hubs and those sorts of spots, so that we can start to emulate these programs but find alternate market channels for them. So that's one category that we've heard. Another one is doing a lot of advocacy to have federal funding released. And so that looks like public pressure and narrative building. It looks like talking to all of the representatives and representation on the Hill that we have in the state of Illinois and beyond, to get ag committees and a variety of different mechanisms from within and without, like the USDA and various agencies, to be able to apply pressure on the administration to free up the funding or to undo the freezes. oh, and just to clear up some language, the funds are frozen for the most part, and so a lot of these programs haven't necessarily been cut writ large, but the LFPA for contract for 2025 did get cut. But we are hearing in other states that, especially, I believe they heard in New Jersey and Texas and a couple of other places that the contracts that were signed before 2025 for LFPA and the cooperative agreements will be honored. But we have yet to hear word from that in Illinois quite yet. And so we're kind of reserving our hopes for that, but that's just an update as well. The other the kind of third branch is this looking for private funding and philanthropy and seeing if there's any options to evaluate what is even if we were to find other market channels, what would be the gaps in terms of what growers would have been able to get under a program like LFPA and what they would be able to get at market rates, and what are ways in which we might be able to plug some of the gaps in terms of infrastructure funding and those sorts of things that people are seeing crop up now, and making that case to a lot of our philanthropic partners throughout the food system. And then the final and fourth kind of strategy that we've heard is thinking about how people might be able to support community distribution sites and the people who are doing who are moving food and lead agencies who are moving food during LFPA, and the ways in which we might be able to still get food to the families who would have benefited from these programs if we were to find market channels that would divert food that might have gone to a program like LFPA, now going to, let's say, like a farmer's market or grocery store or something like that. It still leaves those families hanging, and there still needs to be strategies employed to think that through. And so those each of those strategies has people who are convening meetings at various scales, state, city, local, national calls. And what the Community Food Navigator is in the process of doing right now is building a tool that can act as a basic dashboard to be able to just see how all of the where all of those calls are happening, give people opportunities to register for those, and kind of spread those around the food system, because this was something that came out of our last Cook County coordinating call on Friday. And we're really building this plane while flying it, like I said earlier. And so we wanted to open up this conversation to see, are there people, or do these focus areas make sense to folks? Does this idea of a dashboard feel appealing? And then also, what are ways that people have thought about moving forward that kind of puts the onus on responding to this into the hands of the community, not in terms of owning the responsibility of this, but in terms of thinking, if we're going to have a real sustainable solution coming out of this, we need to make sure that our local food system has legs that go beyond funding that can kind of be pulled out from under us at any given point. And this is a prime opportunity to do so, because I think we've put in so much work to be able to build out the capacity and the market channels and the scalability and the relationships and all of that. And so I think that we've got a really good opportunity here. But yeah, anyway, so want to open up the conversation to respond to all of what I just said, see if people have other updates that I might have missed that they'd want to share, and then see if there are ways in which folks might be able to orient their capacities to contributing to these solutions, whether it's through your organization or your personal time. Yeah, we hope for this to be a group conversation, so feel free to raise your hand and come off mute, or pop anything that you're thinking about in the chat as well, and we can read that out loud.
Before folks start to chime in, we have live Spanish interpretation as well as live captioning. And so if folks do hop on, please be sure to speak slowly and clearly. since they are racing to try and include all of this information and we're discussing very niche topics. If you can also try and say some of the acronyms initially or spell them out more clearly once we're discussing. Thank you.
While folks are thinking, I'm going to start coming through the chat too. And if folks don't mind, also, there might be a few people who have introduced ideas in here that I might just ask to just expand on them a little bit just to get the conversation started as well.
Yeah, and just to remind folks, the four kind of like prongs or like avenues that we're kind of discussing and seeing if folks have thoughts or ideas in them are in the chat. Adam was really helpful in adding those there if you need to review them. And I also just want to highlight Liz shared a nice comment with some resources, and I specifically want to highlight it just to point out the fact that Illinois Stewardship Alliance, or ISA, and as well as the Rhizome Network here at CIVPAC, are all doing really valuable work in the advocacy side of things. So if you're interested in that, I highly encourage you to follow both of like their work. It's just like all of these different spaces are in conversation with each other, but it's also valuable, I think, to know that these conversations are happening everywhere. And there might be different conversations. And part of our hope is to build a place where people can find all the conversations that are happening and find which one makes the most sense for them to join, or join all of them, right? If you have the time.
Thinking about that, maybe Israel, you might also want to give folks a sense of what sorts of conversations are being started in the Navigator app as well. Because I think it's important that people just know where people are having conversations around and receiving updates from these sorts of things. Because it looks like in the chat, people are sharing a variety of like action alerts and those sorts of things where folks are consolidating these resources.
Yeah. So what is the name of oh, Alex. Yes. So I'll if you're already in the app, actually the easiest way is for you to let me know that you're in the app and that you want to be added to the LFPA group, and I will send you an invite. So for those who want to join the Navigator app space, you can email me directly if you want to be invited to the app and to the group. We did create a private group within the app only because this is going to be the app is still a relatively small and new space. And we want to make sure that it doesn't just become LFPA. And so that people have a private place where they can still discuss this. So there is a private group within the app that was created. And yeah, Nick has just put my email. Shoot me an email, tell me that you were in this, and that you want to be invited to both the app and the group. But to point to Nick's point and like question about what is being discussed in the app. So we're just starting that group space, and it's coming from our Fridays at 10 a.m. call. This used to be a monthly call where we would coordinate. I think Nick gave a little bit of this already, but it started as us coordinating the Cook County lead agencies for LFPA, and initially it was meant just to serve as a way for all of us to strategize how we were all applying to the program and implementing the program, share resources, information. It was really fruitful in connecting folks that were disconnected for whatever reason because the funding didn't come through the way that it was supposed to, things like that. But a lot of the conversations that were starting already, even before this freeze, a lot of the conversations that were happening there were about how do we take LFPA and use it to off-ramp us into a more resilient food system where we have where consumers at every level of income in Chicago and the region are able to access locally sourced food at a price point that makes sense for them. And we know that the tools exist, like as Nick pointed out, the relationships, the connective tissues have been built, and LFPA helped strengthen those. And so now that we maybe don't have as big of a ramp as we once thought we did, we're trying to figure out what are the tools and resources we need to build to make that happen. And so we are very much in an ideating space right now, where we're talking about just what are different solutions that people there have been talks about a collaborative CSA that was shared in the app, which CSA is community supported agriculture, right? So for those of you who know, community supported agriculture, and it's essentially it's a subscription program where you subscribe to a farm and they will bring you food, or you will pick up like a box of produce every week during the growing season. So there's been talk about building something like that, but that collects from a lot of farms. I think something that was discussed and I think has been reinforced in hearing some of the testimony that I heard from growers in Springfield recently was that yesterday? This week it's been very long. Yesterday was, LFPA offered a lot of benefits, including paying a high price to growers, but something that is also, and that's obviously that is going to be difficult to match in the market. But another thing that has been really valuable about LFPA for growers, and that was mentioned multiple times, is that growers knew that their produce was sold. All they knew is that they just had to they had to grow what they had committed to growing, and they didn't have to worry about finding market channels, about things changing on them, at least until now. And so the hope here is that we can use these relationships in the way that lead agencies and other parties have served to aggregate and handle some of that heavy lifting, and ideally build a system that can do that for growers, so that growers can continue to focus on growing, and we can continue, and lead agencies and other folks in this space can continue to making sure that food is being distributed in a way that still supports those of us with the least resources. So
Israel, real quick, are you just able, in case folks aren't super familiar, can you just explain what the lead agencies sort of consist of, what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lead agencies were, as their name kind of implies, they were the parties responsible for the actual using of the money that came through the local food purchasing agreement and the delivery of the food. So just to be clear, the local food purchasing agreement kind of had two parts to it. On one hand, growers, local growers, small growers, and growers of historically disadvantaged communities were being paid at a premium price for their produce. And then that produce, rather than being sold, was being given to communities in need. And this is kind of why we also highlighted both of those prongs earlier in the discussion, that there's both the need of making sure growers have a market, but also that we don't leave communities that were starting to rely on this for a healthy food source, that we don't just leave them behind in whatever solution we build. But so the lead agencies were the ones responsible for communicating with growers. They were the ones responsible for communicating with pantries or other institutions that were actually distributing food at the local level. They were all also, for the most part, they were the ones actually handling the money. They were the ones receiving the funding. So another aspect of how this has affected different folks is there are institutions that there are some of the lead agencies in Illinois and in other parts of the country, because the local food purchasing agreement was a program that was in multiple states. There are some lead agencies that are very much at risk right now, who are potentially having to let people go or potentially close altogether because they had used a lot of the money from LFPA and haven't received that money from the government and now don't know when they're going to receive it. And there's also a matter that there are lead agencies of varying capacities. And so there are lead agencies that are well-funded institutions that can weather the storm for the most part. And there are lead agencies that are relatively small and that actually took on a risk by participating in this program in order to support their communities and growers in their community, and who might not be at a greater risk now that the funds are being rescinded. And so that's also part of the conversation where we're talking about getting fundraising, and supporting all the folks involved in this work, that we need to be proportional and thoughtful about. Not everyone is as vulnerable in this situation, and that doesn't mean that we forget about folks that are a little bit more safe, but just that we need to be conscious that we need to care for those who are at the biggest risk right now. Those both growers and agencies that might be at a risk of dissolvency or just losing their farm, as well as folks who need food. I hope that offers clarity for any folks that, but yeah, I don't know where I started with all this. I can, if you get me talking, I can go for a while. But I think we were specifically talking about the kind of solutions that we're discussing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and talking a little bit about the app as being a central hub for those conversations. And so I think people being able to drop in the chat where they know folks are convening around these sorts of pillars, and we can start to pull together that information. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to have on our radar is, like, how do we evaluate the impact of this broadly throughout the food system? We are talking about, all the lead agency, conversations that we're having are specifically just talking about the LFPA program, and there are dozens of programs similar to it that have been cut to, and I want to make sure that they, that's also kind of like taken into play as well. But even those conversations generally have fallen into these sorts of categories around, how do we fill in the gap around the, whatever it was, if it was infrastructure funding or like local schools funding, and how do we replace, like, how do we figure out a way to kind of like evaluate what that gap was and then fill it too. And so there's got to be this process of kind of figuring out what are these metrics that we need to collect, and how do we think about not just how much federal funding is off of the table, but how do we measure the gap between what would happen with this federal money on the table and with it off the table as well, in terms of people's farm plans and scaling up and all of that, like as well, right? And so anyways, yeah, I don't know if folks, we really do want this to be an open conversation for folks to be able to jump in and talk about what they've heard in these other spaces, what's going on in your ends, how your organizations are responding to this. And yeah, so feel free to raise your hands, come off mute, if folks have thoughts.
I'm also just trying to narrow down some of the solutions that you've had. So I'm just I will put that in the chat. Michaela, thank you for raising your hand.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead and
can
jump in.
chime in. This is an idea based off of the community supported agriculture box. Y'all already might be familiar, but we met Market Box Chicago in our listening sessions. And I just want to highlight the work that they're doing because it really is, it's LFPA before LFPA. They are already purchasing from disadvantaged growers on the south and west sides of the city and bringing that food at no cost through a delivery model to individuals that are food insecure. And like it's working. It's been working for years. It's mutual aid focused. So I think like there's an opportunity to maybe learn from the work that they're doing. And like, is there a way that we can plug in some of the farmers? Like, what do they need to scale up? How would we duplicate a similar model? Because like they're doing LFPA without federal funding. And to my knowledge, they're not participating in LFPA at all. And they've only been growing.
Thank you so much for that, Michaela. And Adonis, I see you got your hand raised. Go ahead and jump in there too. I don't know if you have a response or something separate.
Good afternoon, everybody. Adonis here with Grow Greater Inglewood. I've been in conversations with Rep Harper. We do a lobby day every year. I know you mentioned the first step is like politics in, and I know it's going to be scheduled for May 14th. And so that'd be a great day for us to collaborate, going down there, talking to our elected officials, to let them know the impact of the freeze is and how it's impacting us. They're also looking to purchase produce from BIPOC growers from the city and the Chicagoland region to present to these elected officials to show that, hey, people are actually growing and this is what it is. So we're getting the evidence in the hands of the elected officials and they're looking to purchase it. And so that's something that we could possibly collaboratively work towards together.
Yeah, absolutely, Adonis. I think that's really helpful. And I think if there's ways that we would be able to kind of communally track and pull together a calendar of events and those sorts of things where we're able to get this food out into community, we start to kind of just make the case for growers to keep growing because we're finding these like pockets to be able to sell food in, even if we're piecing it together right at the beginning. But all of those opportunities to sell food and do that kind of like direct advocacy that you're talking about, Adonis, is appreciated in any way that that the Hands in the Soil Federation that Grow Greater Inglewood can get involved would be excellent. Alex, I see you have your hand up too. Go ahead, jump in.
Hey, just wanted to share, just to echo that priority should absolutely be given to the highest risk lead agencies and growers. So I think as we're thinking about market opportunities that we can activate quickly, we're thinking about the growers that are most impacted. At Midwest, our infrastructure, we're looking to probably begin with like supporting growers that are uncertain about planting and needing alternate markets, and then looking at those gaps between LFPA and market rate as kind of like where we feel like we can just like, we're set up to engage in those two buckets. We have some ties to what's going on in other states, and we're also following, there is a conversation happening from the produce industry advocacy group, the International Fresh Produce Association. They're meeting with USDA officials this week, and they actually reached out about this to produce distributors, which really tells you how far and wide this story is being told. But we might be able to share or pass along any stories to them for those conversations. That was literally just today while we've been at the summit. So we're going to get on the Navigator app and continue the conversation there, but just kind of wanted to share. And then also Illinois Stewardship Alliance had catalyzed a coordinated conversation with other similar buyers. So down at the farms, Common Market, Tulip Tree Gardens, like all the folks that have other market channels to see how we all might be able to collaborate and coordinate. So we're also trying to stay tuned to that. But that's, and then personally looking to kind of activate other networks. And we talked about this a little bit in the Friday call as well. You know, other market channels, farmers markets, culinary community, like activating everybody outside of just our scope. But that's kind of where we're at for now. But we have heard that there's some like pretty specific things that folks were planning. So like commitments that lead agencies had made to certain products or certain acreage. So that's something that feels also pretty like concrete for us to step in and say, like, can we like work with whatever that concrete plan was, versus sort of just like generally getting into help. If someone was like, we were planning to grow 600 pounds of this or whatever, that's a fake number, small number, but do you know what I'm saying? Like that's something we, and I think other buyers hopefully can like really jump in to meet what the growers were planning. But we don't have set ideas about how exactly to do that yet. But that's the hope.
Absolutely, Alex. I think that's really exciting, and you've hit on a lot of really good points. I think broadly, it seems like it seems like the solutions that y'all are looking about getting plugged into, there's ways to measure what is your ability to like purchase and at what scale and price, and then how, and then figure out like what that gap is. But I think it's just about identifying what are those metrics that we need to collect from folks, and also how do we get visibility into programs that might not have been as like front and center as LFPA. I think that it sounds like there might also be other federal programs that have been cut where there are leads who are also, you know, getting some sort of operational or administrative or overhead funding from federal governments that I want to make sure we have visibility into as well. But I think that point about prioritizing folks who have specific commitments in acreage is really important. And I think it's also important for us to start collecting, maybe just starting to do some narrative work to get out to all of those folks we need to activate, you know, whether like the chefs and like market communities and groceries and all of these sorts of things, so that there's a shared narrative that we're all going to them with around what is the need and what is the opportunity that they have to sort of jump in on as well. So that for growers who are thinking about putting something on the ground, we can start to get a sense of the appetite of those folks to open up those market channels, right? Like there's ways in which we need to kind of think like short and midterm here if people like fulfill these you know, contracts and obligations that are already in play, but and then also encourage people to like put farmland into production that they might not otherwise have if it weren't for LFPA. Like and I'm not sure if that point is coming across clear too, or if that's just something that I'm stuck on. Mama Jafunza, I see this comment in the chat around placing restrictions on neighbors and other growers. Would you be able to elaborate just a little bit on what you meant by that comment?
We attempted to work with Marty Travis down at the farms here in Pembroke, because we were a lead agency for Pembroke, for Pembroke here in Pembroke. And he had a CBO. here in Pembroke. And before the LFPA, he came to talk to Black farmers, and the stipulation was that you had to sign a piece of paper, a contract that stated that basically you had to sell to him. And you could not, like online, you could not sell your things to anyone online. You couldn't go to the places where he was going with his stuff. And I don't know if that was something that he did exclusively for Pembroke, or that was a stipulation that he placed on all of the growers who were working with him. But I'm just letting everybody know that as far as Pembroke was concerned, that was his requirement. We did not sign on with him for that reason, even before the LFPA. And I'm clear and certain that he had like a lead hand on all of the growers that were working with him. Like, we wanted to interview our own neighbors around how the LFPA was working for them early on. And, you know, and he refused. They had to get permission from him for us to talk to them. These are my neighbors of 20 years. And he said, no, we couldn't talk to them. They could not be interviewed for our publication. And he had to write the article. And that was before he put, you know, he ended up on the front page of the Chicago Tribune and made our neighbors look like monkeys when he said he had $150,000 to pay, but he didn't pay the most disadvantaged farmers that he had. And yeah, I'm still on it about it. But I'm just saying, be careful when it comes to Marty Travis. Maybe all the white people or somebody else doesn't get treated like that, but we had serious racism going on in Pembroke Township.
Thank you, Mama Jafunza, for contributing. And I think that it's really important that we understand that the broader context is that there are people who have been dealing with being shut out of these sorts of things for some time. And so, you know, the frustrations that you're talking about experiencing, and the, you know, real difficulty with navigating these structures that, yeah, have been set up to, you know, go against Black farmers, you know, this entire time. We want to make sure that we're not replicating that with what it is that we're building. I think that it's really important to hear also that there might be sorts of legal arrangements and structures that growers are involved in that might limit how they're able to participate in this regional food system work. And it behooves us to think deeply about what sorts of partnership agreements and arrangements we're getting into with our neighbors, and how they're able to enable us or not to build community organically and have conversations with one another that start to break down the barriers that are going to be essential for us to be able to get out of this above water. And a big portion of that is also to look in the face some of the historical harms that have happened as well, so that we can dig this out of our systems and finally start to move towards something where we're, you know, genuinely trying to feed each other, as opposed to thinking about how we can have, you know, just simple, you know, profit incentives around everything that it is that we do. So I appreciate you bringing that perspective, Mama Jafunza, and I think that's heard. And I think that it sounds like there's spaces, and I don't know if this is the one for like specific, like conflict remediation and kind of like, just like acknowledgement of harm. And I think that broadly what we're going to see as we get into all of these conversations is a lot of these tensions are going to be unearthed, and the mask is going to be off for a lot of folks. And it's going to be really important that we remind ourselves that it is only when we're able to kind of put our collective capacities together and look at some of these truths in the face that we're going to be able to build something that's different than what we've been doing this entire time. And so anyways, I would love to find some time to chat a little bit more with you about that, Mama Jafunza, but it also sounds like with some kind of like altering of terms of the ways that farmers are in these sorts of agreements, we actually also have within that like giant pockets of growers that are already connected to one another in some sort of capacity that could be activated for this local food systems work if we can figure out the relational aspect of all of this. So anyways, I really appreciate your contribution and welcome other folks to who want to be able to jump in and kind of think and talk about this, but we do have to be careful to avoid these sorts of pitfalls as we're building moving forward.
Nick and Israel, do we want to mention Friday by chance?
Oh yeah.
Would you like me to share or do?
So there's two things on Friday, I should say. So and we encourage everyone to join as many of you're gonna see there's a lot of different calls happening at different levels for LFPA stuff. And we encourage everyone to just kind of discern to what extent you want to plug into them. I can assure you most of them are Nick, Adam, myself, and a bunch of us are in all of these calls. So, you're not going to be missing big important updates if you choose to go to one over the other. But there is the every other Wednesday call that Adam shared in the chat, and that is hosted by CIFPAC, and that one's the one that's a little bit more focused on the federal funding aspect. If you're interested in like advocacy work, obviously CIFPAC, they're the experts, and highly encourage you to join that call. The Navigator hosts what for now is a weekly call. There used to be our monthly call, but it's now a weekly call. If you want to be added to that, just shoot me an email. I need to set up a sign up link like CIFPAC does, but I don't have that. So you'll need to shoot me an email and I'll send you an invite manually. And so we are hosting that. That is online, and we're hosting that again this Friday. But what I'm assuming Adam was actually talking about is that there will also be an LFPA in-person meeting on Friday. I believe it will be at 1. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So there's yeah. So if you want to hear some of this the continuation of this conversation, I encourage you to join all of those spaces. I think this is the exciting part of this work, honestly, is that there is, for better or for worse, a fire has been lit under a lot of people. And so there is a great deal of energy and enthusiasm to figure out not just a band-aid to this problem, but really an innovative and revolutionary solution to this, so that we can just build something that that doesn't force people to make agreements like the one that Mama Gifunsa just expressed, and that allows all of us that allows growers to participate to whatever extent and with whatever freedoms they want, while still being compensated for their hard work. But yeah, yes. Sorry, I just started reading something in the chat.
No, yeah, and we really appreciate everyone contributing to this conversation. I think right now a lot of folks are just in a period of receiving and kind of settling into this, and some people are in the position of feeling prepared to act, and some people are not sure where exactly to put their capacity. Just know that there's spaces where there's a ton of momentum already, and people really feel clear about what it is that they're doing, and start to tap into those. And so I think, like Israel said at the beginning of the call, there are rhizome policy calls that are happening through CIFPAC, where people who are have been really sharp about staying up to speed and understanding what's going on the advocacy front are tapped into. And on Fridays we will have our meetings where we're going to be talking about coordinating this on a regional scale, And we'll be building a set of tools to be able to track those conversations as well, so that you all can get plugged in as quickly as possible. And then the next thing that we need, we'll build that as well. And we'll keep doing that until we have the set of tools that we need to be able to do this work in the way that we all know is possible. And it seems big and amorphous right now, but we do have the community intelligence to break this thing down and really make it work. I think the importance is to remember that for a lot of us who are involved in this work, we're sitting on one side of a Zoom screen and have paid our rent and are actually well fed. And while there's a lot of scary stuff around what's coming up with our jobs and what's going on with our programs and all of these sorts of things, we have the material capacity and safety right now to be able to do things that people who are at the front and brunt end of this are not capable of quite yet. And so we do have an opportunity to be able to use that for the collective good. And I hope that yeah, folks can keep their heads up over the course of the next few weeks as we move through this. Yeah, I don't know if there are other folks who wanted to jump in and just provide any sort of like closing thoughts as well, and like next steps in different spaces that they're convening in as well. But I know we're bringing this session to a close too.
Yeah, we've still got a couple minutes if folks would like to chime in, either in the chat or you're welcome to come off of Zoom, and then we'll launch a survey poll soon. Well, there's Roger Cooley.
So I'm dropping in the chat to sign up for a Rhizome listserv. There will be some action alerts coming out for advocacy to Congress folks around trying to do pushes to get the USDA to launch the LFPA 25, which was the extension of LFPA. So just kind of as a direct action. There are some organized responses as well from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and other partners for doing letters for getting Congress folks to sign on what's called a Dear Colleague letter. But there will be also direct actions and there will also be petitions for organizations, individuals to sign on as well. And those will be coming out, and I'll put the sign up for the Rhizome network, and then we'll make sure that those action alerts get sent out.
Yeah, and I see Blake, you've got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hey folks, how you doing?
Doing all right. It's good to hear from you, Blake.
Good, good. I just want to find out what can we do on the local level to prepare ourselves, or to protect ourselves from further budget cuts to our food system and stuff.
Yeah. And Blake, when you say us on the local level, you're talking about, I mean, you do everything. I know you're growing at Urban Growers Collective, and then
I'm
are you
cleaning
thinking
up.
beyond that?
What can we do to sustain ourselves locally and to protect ourselves from the budget cuts?
Yeah. And I think this is a big question that the group is doing some deep thinking around right now. So it seems to me that the solutions that are emerging for that are figuring out ways that because we're not going to be able to necessarily prevent future budget cuts, the way that we prevent ourselves from experiencing the brunt of them is figuring out ways to keep the programs that they were going to cut running. And so that might be through philanthropic funding, and it might be through the variety of different pathways. There's advocacy that's happening at the government, like policy level, and then there's also going to be we'll try to figure out other ways to be able to get growers to sell food, Blake. But I think that the solutions are still emerging, but it's really important that staying plugged into spaces like this, we'll be able to tell you when those steps kind of come into play. But Right now, I think it's just connecting with the people who grow food in your community, and figuring out what it is that they might need in terms of material support on the ground in the meantime. But we can definitely chat about this offline too, Blake. Yeah.
Is there? Shoot.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Blake. Okay, any others?
If folks are thinking, we've just got a couple minutes. I've launched our summit session poll survey. If you don't mind taking a couple minutes to fill that out. And in case we get really close to time, I want to also just thank our live Spanish interpreters as well as our live captioners. And I want to quickly just highlight that we have 3 more sessions after this, beginning at 5:30. We have Community Equity Sustenance, New Models for Our Food System, Breeding for Wonder, a local grower who has pretty much created their own unique pepper, and we'll be sharing more about that. Our Stories Sustain Us, resource stories workshop, and then mobilizing research in support of the Good Food Purchasing Initiative. So just want to highlight that there's plenty more programming starting at 5:30, and then tomorrow will be day 2 of our virtual programming, and we hope to see many of you on Friday. So wanted to share that. We have a couple minutes. We'll reopen the space.
Thanks so much, y'all.
And again, highlighting that Friday in person will be that session. And then Israel, if folks are interested, just what time is the session you all normally host on Fridays around LFPA?
10 a.m.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And then another reminder that our federal funding call is every other Wednesday at 2 p.m., with the next one being March 19th. So we're pretty much at time. If there isn't a burning desire,
Thank you all for bringing us together to discuss this. This is super important.
thank you.
Thank you all for participating. I think I just want to say to like Blake's question earlier, this is the work that we can all start doing now. Like the answers will come from all of us coming together and sharing solutions and facing difficult questions, and the actionable steps will come from that work. So thank you all for coming.
And thank you both for stepping up last minute and hosting this and holding this space for us. And in addition to all the work that you're already doing. So thank you all. Hope we can see many of you Friday. We'll at least see you on some other calls during the virtual summit. And thanks again. Really appreciate it.